Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Slash Filmcast, the official podcast of SlashFilm.com. I'm David Chen, and I'm back, baby. I'm back, guys. Hey.
Lubba lubba dub dub.
Yay!
Hey, I'm back.
Welcome back, David.
And I'm really excited to be here with
Devendra Hardwar.
Jeff Kanata.
And joining us today, he's the editor-in-chief of SlashFilm.com. He's also the host of Slash Film Daily. Peter Serrata, welcome back to the Slash Filmcast. Peter, how are you doing today?
I am so excited to be here for this episode. Like, I've been waiting all year for this, and actually now that it's come, I don't know what to do with myself.
Indeed.
Yeah, you've been waiting for this more than the movie itself, right, Peter?
Yes.
Yeah, Peter was really upset that you left the show for a while, Dave. He's been waiting for you to come back. Oh, the movie you were excited about?
The movie, Peter. Okay. Well, anyway, you can find more episodes of this podcast at slashfilmcast.com. Email us at slashfilmcast@gmail.com. And today, what we're going to be doing is discussing Star Wars The Last Jedi. That's all we're going to be talking about because there is so much to discuss. But before we get to that, I want to mention just a couple things. First of all, Peter Serrata, you've been hosting Slash Film Daily, and we should give it a plug, right? Slash Film Daily, what is this show? Tell me what this podcast at Slash Film is that you speak of.
It is published daily on slashfilm.com. You can get it on iTunes and all the popular podcast apps. Basically, we cover that day's news for movies, TV, general pop culture. And we, unlike I think a lot of shows out there that have, commentary and that kind of stuff, we have the actual people from slashfilm.com that write the stories and do the research and, have extensive knowledge and all this, come on and talk about it and discuss it. And we also do fun things like top tens and mailbags and all sorts of interesting things. Like today on the podcast, which I guess this is publishing a week from when I'm talking or whenever, we had a clip from my interview with Ryan Johnson where I talked to him about his new Star Wars trilogy and more. So you can get cool little tidbits like that on the podcast.
Yeah, and I think you can find it at daily.slashfilm.com, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Peter.
Yes.
How you holding up with that daily content?
Oh, it's not easy.
It's intense, right? I do a daily show as well. It's not easy.
Yeah,
It's
but
not
yours,
easy.
Jeff, how long is yours? Like 5 minutes, right, or something like that?
It's 10 minutes,
10 minutes.
and Peter's like a full.
Peter does like a full 30-minute show, 40-minute
Yeah.
show. That's insane.
And I'll say this much, not to pat you on the back, Dave, or any of you guys. Actually, I've been listening to you guys since Dave has been, gone. You guys make it sound easy hosting a podcast. Not to say I thought it was easy, but it is much harder. Like, I know many people out there are listening to this now and probably think it's just like a bunch of guys having a conversation, but it's so hard to like move things along and segue and introduce. I don't know. I just have so much appreciation for what you guys do.
Well, you have ramped up into that skill set very, very well, Mr. Serrata. I'm impressed that you took on such an ambitious project and you've succeeded with such aplomb.
Yeah, I enjoy the show. You can find it at daily.slashfilm.com. Now, I've been gone for the last couple months, and the first thing I wanted to say to you guys is thank you very much. I just really appreciate Jeff and Devendra taking the reins while I was gone. Like, it's not every podcast has folks that are super talented at hosting and substituting, and I just am so grateful for you guys tackling this while I was gone, allowing me to step away and gather my thoughts on things. I really appreciate it. Also want to thank all the awesome guests we had on, especially Christy, I think, who was on 3 times, which is like the MVP of the guests while we were gone. And it's great to have her on the show, and I expect to have her on in the future when I will be around. So I'm really looking forward to that as well. And so just wanted to say thank you. You guys are awesome. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's no problem, Dave. I'm reminded of that Simpsons episode where Marge goes to the spa and she comes back and everyone's like, please don't go. Please don't go. Stay. It really helps.
Well, guys, I do have some reactions to things in the last couple months. And I don't want to do a 50-minute long what we've been watching. So I'm just going to say the following. I wasn't crazy about the ending of the Florida Project. Blind people should be allowed to experience movies. Brawl in Cell Block 99 was weak schlock. Thor Ragnarok was only okay. Lady Bird is one of the best films of the year. I, Tonya is spectacular. And I am so extremely glad I did not have to go see Justice League like you guys. So I think that basically catches us up.
Wow,
right?
Dave, did you know that you could do the show in like 2.5 minutes?
I just realized it.
There's also like hours of arguments from that. So good job.
Well, again, so glad you guys were able to take over for me and host, and I'm glad to be back. So why don't we dive into our review of Star Wars: The Last Jedi? Okay. That was from the trailer of Star Wars: The Last Jedi, the newest film in the Star Wars Skywalker saga. I'm going to read the plot summary from IMDb, and it is a very vague plot summary. So here we go.
Dave, you should reiterate the fact that in this portion of the show, we are going to be very particular not to spoil anything. So if there's a chance that you want to listen to this and you haven't had your screening yet, you are safe, at least until we designate spoiler section beginning.
That's right. That's right. You can safely listen to our overall thoughts. We will not divulge any plot details whatsoever. This is basically the opposite of your warning for our Split episode, Jeff, where you told everyone to turn it off. This is like, we're going to be very vague.
Keep it on.
We're going to give general thoughts, and then we're going to dive into spoilers, which is going to be the majority of this episode. So, from IMDb, having taken her first steps into the Jedi world, Rey joins Luke Skywalker on an adventure with Leia, Finn, and Poe that unlocks mysteries of the Force and secrets of the past. So, before we dive into the show, Jeff Kanata, I wrote an article for slashfilm.com that was actually basically just targeted at you. I don't know if you saw it, but it was about how I avoided every single trailer for Star Wars: The Last Jedi before I stepped into the movie theater.
You're welcome, Dave.
Well, I don't think it was because of you, but but I did write the article, in some ways inspired by you, just because I'm guessing this is a movie that you've avoided all the trailers for as well, right?
Indeed, I have.
And this one was a tough one, Jeff. This is a tough one to avoid all the trailers for.
I think it was harder to avoid The Force Awakens than it was this. I think The Force Awakens was more blanketed. More people posted it like in the context of tweets. I think this one, literally the only thing that I saw going in was an image of the Porg.
The Porg was inescapable
everywhere. Yeah. But that was really the only that and the red. There's like a red guard costume that I saw beforehand, but those are literally the only two images that I saw before I went into this movie, which I thought pretty good actually.
I actually found people like us, Jeff, when I went to see I think it was Blade Runner. I went to see it at the Seattle Cinerama, and the trailer for The Last Jedi came on screen, and I walked right out of the theater because I didn't want to do the closing your eyes and plugging your ears thing. I just walked straight out of the theater, and I found like 2 to 3 other dudes out there.
Was it like a fenced off group, just like no spoilers corner?
It's like it's like how smokers are now.
Smokers, aka non-trailer consumers.
You guys have a problem.
We were out there and
shunned from mains of society.
Dave, this is so sad. This is I feel bad.
There was and I remember him talking about it. He's like, I started hearing that Star Wars music, and then he like kind of looked off wistfully into the middle distance, like, that's the cue. Like, we gotta go because I can't watch any of this. All that said,
we are Legion, David. We are Legion.
There are
we live we live among you. You don't know the Muggles walk freely. You don't know.
Can I say, guys? I have seen all the trailers. I'm sure Peter has as well. They spoiled nothing. They were very smart. I appreciate having that year of joy in my life rather than
actually on top of spoiling nothing. I talked to Ryan Johnson about this. You can read that on slashfilm.com. They actively misdirected.
Yes, and that was kind of brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say this about the trailers. After I watch the movie, I go home and I watch all the trailers because I love watching trailers. I just don't like watching them before I see the movie. And I watch all the trailers, and I kind of give the movie a grade as to how much it spoiled things. And I would give this a B+ in terms of not spoiling things. I thought you're right; like none of the plot is revealed, other than the Luke and Rey stuff, which you kind of already know from the end of the first film, Force Awakens. It does show some third act stuff, though. It does show like scenes and moments from the third act. But yeah, in general, the trailers did a pretty good job of hiding things. That said, Jeff and I think can say pretty strongly that we're glad that we avoided the trailers. We have no regrets, right, Jeff?
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
All right.
And by the way, I want to say this because I know that you guys have talked about seeing the trailers after you see the movie. That's a totally different experience. It's almost like circular reasoning, or I don't know what the term is for that, when you go into like an argument already having your opinion. Do you know what I mean? Like when you see the trailer and you see that there's a moment from the third act, you know the context of that moment. But if you had seen that before seeing the movie, it would be a totally different experience.
All right, Peter. Agree to disagree. All that said, you are the biggest Star Wars fan I know. And I think you got to go to the premiere of this film, right?
Yeah, I got to go to the world premiere in downtown Los Angeles. It was fantastic. I've been lucky to go to the last two. Fingers crossed, I might be able to go to the final, or I guess episode 9. Should I give you my reaction?
Yeah, give us your reaction. What'd you think of Star Wars: Last Jedi?
I left the theater speechless and shaken. Which is actually a weird thing to do, to walk into like a world premiere party and like people are wanting to talk to you. And
I thought you were going to say, I left the theater 10 minutes in. I hated it so much.
No way. But like this movie has so many like huge, holy shit, shocking turn of events. So much underlying emotion, laughed out loud humor that was so unexpected. It's so ballsy, bonkers, sometimes weird. Yeah. It's bold. It feels like Rian Johnson film. So many iconic shots, so much to chew on. So I need to see this film again. But I do have a couple issues, and I have a feeling I'm probably going to have more issues than you guys, which is strange.
I don't know. I had a bunch of issues too, but overall, it sounds like you liked it. And did you like it more than Force Awakens, or where does this rank in terms of your ranking of the Star Wars films?
I liked it more than Rogue One, but I don't think I liked it more than Force Awakens. And we talked about that later, but I think this is a better and more competently made film than Force Awakens. But I don't think, because of this is so plot heavy and twist heavy, that this is going to be as rewatchable as Force Awakens.
Yeah, we should also point out it is quite a long film. It's 2.5 hours long. Is it the longest Star Wars film? Right? It's
yes.
It's up there, yeah. So Peter did not like it as much as Force Awakens. A lot of people are saying this is the best Star Wars film, or the best Star Wars film since Empire. Jeff Kanata, what say you?
I said the first one. It is the best Star Wars film. Period.
Wow.
I think it's the best Star Wars film ever made. I think it is it is everything that I would want and more out of a Star Wars movie. It is the best shot Star Wars film, the best filmed Star Wars film. It has,
and by the way, they did use actual film to shoot it, I believe. So very old school. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it is exquisitely shot. There's nothing in any of the Star Wars movies, any of them, that is as well shot as the first 10 minutes of this movie. I mean, I think this movie starts with the best Star Wars sequence in the history of the Star Wars movies and gets crazier from there. The opening sequence of this movie there's nothing like it in the Star Wars. There are shots, iconic shots. There are plenty of iconic shots from Star Wars. Listen, I love Star Wars. I mean, I live it, breathe it. My 1-year-old son's room is Star Wars. Like, I have love for these movies, but I think that if I try to dispassionately look at even my love for the original trilogy, this movie outpaces them on every level. There are so many incredible filmic moments, and that is, I think, something that a great director brings to this franchise. And that's not to take away anything from some of the directors that have worked on the franchise, but none of them have, I think. You have these incredible shots from Empire, for example, with, silhouetted Vader and silhouetted Luke in that famous sword fight. And those are indelible images, right? There are plenty of those in the Star Wars franchise, but I think this movie has more of them per minute than any of those. And they aren't all just contrived. They grow out of great writing and emotional beats as well. I was more emotional in this movie than I have been in a Star Wars movie. And a lot of that, honestly, has to do with the fact that Carrie Fisher is no longer with us. Every time she's on screen, it was an emotional wallop for me. But I think the movie itself is emotional. The thrills are incredible. The thing about The Force Awakens, which I still love that movie, and I feel positively about it, but it is undeniably a derivative work, right? It is a wonderful character piece. It is a wonderful reinvestment into Star Wars and a revitalization of Star Wars after the prequels. And JJ did a lot of wonderful things in that movie, casting most notably, and creating great characters that I want to be with for multiple films. But plot-wise, world-building-wise, universe-building-wise, it is undeniably derivative. It is undeniably I
think that was the point, though. I think,
sure, okay, but what is so wonderful about this movie is you have fresh ideas. You have the things that I love about the original trilogy is every time we revisit the universe of Star Wars, we find out new things that are possible that we didn't know. We didn't know there was a big Sarlacc pit in the desert. We didn't know that there was this forest moon and they had speeder bikes, and we didn't know AT-ATs existed on this ice world. It kept expanding and expanding and expanding, and at a certain point, it felt like where that stopped happening. The prequels, actually, Lucas did a great job of expanding and adding ideas to the world, but he was kind of recirculating the same old characters, and why is Boba Fett still hanging out, etc. And I found this movie to be full of fresh ideas, fresh imagery, but better than all of that. That's all just preamble to the fact that it gets Star Wars on a level that I don't think any of the movies since Jedi have done, since Return of the Jedi have done. And that is understanding what it is that's special about this concept of the Force and about light and dark and who people are and what it is to dream and all of the things that captured me as a little kid. This movie understands and elevates and expands upon. It is, I mean, we'll get to specific spoilers about stuff, but I was just so energized. I found myself jumping up and down in my seat. Peter, I totally understand what you mean about leaving the theater hyperventilating and shaking, and I was crying throughout most of the movie. I was crying because of Carrie Fisher, but also because of how good it was and how much it spoke to that little kid in me that dreamed about all this stuff. And it keeps one-upping itself over and over. There are sequences that I think are not as strong as others, but overall, this movie has so much in it, and so much of it is excellent, and I think far outstrips any of the previous Star Wars movies for me.
All right. Devindra Hardawar, when you watched Star Wars The Last Jedi, you tweeted, "Think of your ideal Star Wars movie, the one you've always dreamed of. The Last Jedi is better than that." What did you mean by that?
What I meant really was I think it's going to surpass most people's expectations.
Hold on, Devindra, sorry. You're coming in really quiet. Can you guys hear him?
Sorry.
Yeah, it's very quiet.
It's very quiet.
Hello.
There you go.
Better?
Yep. Go ahead. Yep.
I think what I meant there was just it's going to surpass a lot of people's expectations. And I think it did so for me. I mean, you guys know we love Rian Johnson over here. I remember seeing Brick and thinking this guy is going places. So I'm not at all surprised that he is helming, a big Star Wars movie. He has a whole other trilogy coming after this. At the same time, I don't think it's a perfect movie. I love this film. But I think in some ways, like walking out of Force Awakens, I think I was maybe a little more moved with that one. And those are some things we're going to have to get into in the spoilers. Sorry, I had to cough there.
No worries.
Yeah, I think mainly what really works in this film is the way Rian Johnson handles the characters. He's always good at character beats, always great with dialogue. The imagery that he imbues this film with is like nothing we've ever seen in the Star Wars universe. Specifically, there's like the way he uses red in this film. It's in all the posters and some of the trailers and stuff too. But just kind of astounding, like a shock of color that we didn't really see much of throughout the rest of the trilogy. Like maybe the neon in the Empire set, I think, where they were having the the Luke and Vader fight.
Darth Maul's face as well.
Yeah, Darth Maul's face, but it was never. This is very, very red. This is like bold, and
it's very. It feels very purposeful as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. So I think the imagery. There's some shots that we will definitely talk about that just feel iconic immediately, and things we've never seen in the series before. At the same time, I think the movie may be, as I think about it more, it may be a little too long. I think there's some B-plot stuff going on that kind of backtracks and kind of loses its momentum a little. But overall, like the major plot, like the Rey plot, the Luke plot was all really well done. I think he did a great job with this. There's just, it's I think in some ways The Force Awakens moved me more, probably because the way J.J. Abrams works, right? He is great with set pieces. He is great with painting with broad strokes. And that really helps when it comes to setting up a world and giving us all these new characters. So this one kind of feels like a middle chapter to me. I really enjoyed it, but it didn't feel as like overall fulfilling to me as Force Awakens did.
Interesting. So I think, with the strength of The Force Awakens is when I watch J.J. Abrams movies, I'm never bored. Like,
right.
Those movies move, man. Those
He's
movies
a blockbuster.
Move. Yeah, I mean, they just have all this momentum and energy to them, and I think like they are reverse engineered in a way that you can never, be bored. You can never think to yourself, "Oh, I'm watching a movie, and when's this movie going to be over?"
He is like the ideal Michael Bay protege, basically, like or the successor, right? He's somebody who makes big blockbuster movies that are always exciting.
Yeah. And this movie is not like that. I think The Last Jedi is a great film. It is a great Star Wars film. And I particularly loved the themes of the movie, which I'm going to get into during the spoiler section. I think it's a movie that's very much for our time. It is a lesson that we need right now in our culture right now, in my opinion. And I can't even say what that lesson is unless I go into spoilers, so I'm not going to. But I love the messages that the movie's trying to send kids, and I love, like what you said, Jeff, that this movie is trying to restore Star Wars to its place of being that inspiration for filmmakers like Rian Johnson. The ideas of this franchise have inspired so many people over the years to get into film, to participate in the arts. This movie recognizes that and wants to bring Star Wars back to its rightful place in people's hearts. It's kind of helping to finish the work that The Force Awakens began in redeeming a series that had really lost a lot of people over the years, especially because of the prequels. So all that said, while The Force Awakens I think is more entertaining, is a movie that I think is more broadly appealing, I do think that The Last Jedi is a better film.
Oh yeah, I agree.
And it reminds me of this.
Even I agree with that.
Yeah, it reminds me of this this speech that, and this is a really random reference, but that's what I bring to the show, guys. In season 4 of The West Wing. And I don't know if you remember anything from season 4 of The West Wing, but there was this plot that about this guy that was like a George W. Bush stand-in who was running against Jed Bartlett.
Yeah.
And there's this moment when Josh, the deputy chief of staff, is talking about this George W. Bush-esque character and this character's speeches. And he says the following quote. He says, what does this remind you of? I believe in hope, not fear. I'm a leader, not a politician. It's time for an American leader. Americans earned a change. I before E, except after C. It's the fortune cookie candidacy. These are important thinkers, and understanding them can be very useful, and it's not ever going to happen at a 4-hour seminar. When the president's got an embassy surrounded in Haiti, or a keyhole photograph of a heavy water reactor, or any of the 50 life and death matters that walk across his desk every day, I don't know if he's thinking about Immanuel Kant or not. I doubt it, but if he does, I am comforted at least in my certainty that he is doing his best to reach for all of it, and not just the McNuggets. And so that's the quote.
So good.
And it's a great quote, and I think I feel like J.J. Abrams' inspirations are, Spielberg. Like Spielberg is probably his biggest inspiration. Rian Johnson's inspirations are like Akira Kurosawa. Do you know what I mean? And
right.
I feel like this movie is reaching for so much more than The Force Awakens did in terms of the depth of its characters, in terms of what it's trying to say, not just about the franchise, but about our world. So it's hugely ambitious. It's very weird. And I don't know if people will like it as much. I'm very curious. We're recording this on December 13th. I'm very curious what the public reaction is going to be.
Dave, I think you've made a rather brilliant analogy there with the Kurosawa versus Spielberg, right? Because Spielberg is inspired by Kurosawa, right? And Abrams is like it's once removed, right? And I think that says it so well that. I mean, it's fine to be inspired by Spielberg. Many of us are, but.
And I'm painting with extremely broad strokes. I'm sure J.J. Abrams is also inspired by Kurosawa, but I feel like it's more evident in Rian Johnson's work than it is in Abrams' work. You know?
Certainly, what he's going for in this film, like there are scenes that feel like they're from Kurosawa.
Yeah, that are like directly mirrors of Kurosawa movies.
It doesn't feel like it's an illustrative point that you've made, because it doesn't feel like an imitation of an imitation like The Force Awakens does to me. And that sounds more derogatory than I mean it to sound, because I really like The Force Awakens, but it's clearly trying to be something where The Last Jedi feels like it's just an original work.
Right.
And that is what makes it so special and powerful for me.
Agreed.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder how much of that comes down to the freedom Rian Johnson had, right? Like, they needed Force Awakens to be a hit, you know?
Right.
Well,
the entire. Okay, go ahead.
I was going to say they not only needed it to be a hit, but they were coming off the prequels, and they needed people to feel like it was, the original trilogy again.
They needed surefire success, pretty much.
But I don't even think it's just a success. I think JJ was hired to recapture that magic of the originals, not create something, decidedly new. And I think Ryan is given. I'm not saying that JJ couldn't make this movie, but I'm saying I think Ryan was given, an open canvas to be like, okay, now we can do whatever we want.
But I will say this, and maybe this is unfair, and maybe I'll regret saying it. I kind of hope I do regret saying it. My first thought as the credits rolled on this movie was Episode 9 can only be a letdown, because I don't think J.J. Abrams can make a movie this good. I just don't think he's capable of it. I love J.J. Abrams movies. I really do. I'm a fan. But this is on an entirely different level. And I don't think that now that whatever that mandate was that you guys are implying he had for Episode 7, one would assume now those gloves are off for Episode 9. I don't think he brings us something on the level that Rian Johnson has, because I don't think he's capable of it.
I mean, that just that feels like a rough supposition, just because I've seen so much of Abrams' work. I know what he's capable of. It's a different level of work. Like you could think of Force Awakens and Last Jedi as sort of the difference between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, right? And Empire is clearly a more dramatic film. It wasn't made, it wasn't directed by Lucas, and it has a very different feel to it. And I think we have that same transition, like from the pulpy feel to something that feels almost operatic here with this movie.
But I don't think this movie feels at all like Empire Strikes Back.
No, it doesn't. It feels more like Return of the Jedi. But we'll get to that. I do want to say on that same note that this is the first Star Wars movie that I walked out of in a while that I wasn't kind of excited about what's next. And it's not because J.J. Abrams is doing it. It's because this film kind of almost ends. Do you know what I mean? Like without getting to the spoilers, but it feels
satisfying kind of, on a level that it kind Empire of, isn't.
It kind of answers the questions you want answered. It kind of, do you know what I mean? Like bookends. Like, and I don't know what J.J. Abrams is going to do, because he's good at asking questions and creating characters, and like he needs to close this trilogy. And I don't know what.
Well, one assumes there was a 3-film arc established before, Word 1 was written in Episode 7. So one assumes that they all know where it's headed. But I agree with you that there were like 4 moments where I thought, I guess we're heading into home here with because this seems like the cliffhanger moment, the Empire cliffhanger moment where we're going to be left wanting Episode 9. And it's like, no, we got like 45 more minutes where we're going to wrap some stuff up for you. So, and I love that about this movie. Like, it feels like a complete experience, and it is long and it's not perfect. I do think we'll get into specific sequences that I think aren't as strong as others, but I love this. This is the most complete Star Wars experience I've had. Like, you wouldn't. I mean, it's hard to divorce yourself from like 5-year-old you, and it's really hard.
You think like on a score level, this has better music than the original trilogy?
I mean, it doesn't exist in a vacuum without the original trilogy, right?
Yeah.
But the music in this film is amazing, and there are moments when each character's theme rises. You know, like Rey's theme will come on, and I'm like, oh my! Rey's theme is so different from anybody else's in the history, and it adds such beautiful counterpoint to what's happening on screen. I mean, the music in this movie is great, and which is crazy because it's like a 90 million year old man doing it. It's crazy.
I want to say a couple things in response to what you guys have said. First of all, I want to read this quote by Tony Zhu. I actually don't know if that's how you pronounce his last name. Do you guys know who Tony Zhu is? He's the guy who created every frame of painting.
Yeah, we've had this conversation before.
By the way,
Joe.
Pour one out.
Tony
Pour one out for that.
Yeah.
They announced they're stopping, which is I think a loss for the entire internet. What a beautiful,
so sad.
One of the most
series.
successful and influential YouTube channels ever created. And yeah,
one of the best.
They basically stopped pumping out videos, and they put up a post saying like it's over, and it's very sad, but there is something to be said for going out on top and on your own terms. But yes, Tony wrote this post on Facebook that I don't know if I have permission to read, but I'm going to anyway. He writes here, I thought Force Awakens was okay, but I'm so tired of watching anything directed by J.J. Abrams. Basically, he's a salvage master. If you don't know, salvage masters are real-life adventurers. When a ship capsizes, they come in and they find a way to refloat it. They're highly trained mercenaries, and they do work that is legal piracy. But if they can save the capsized ship, they often get 40 to 70% of its cargo value. It's fascinating stuff. A salvage master needs to know an enormous amount about ships, physics, and engineering. They have to plan meticulously, but since each situation is unique, they're often guessing with an object that weighs 55,000 tons. A little too much weight one way or another could ruin everything. So far in 10 years, J.J. Abrams has refloated 3 separate franchises. Clearly, he's very good at what he does. He has a knack for looking at a franchise, exploring its innards, considering all the pieces, and then pumping in enough water so that the ship rights itself. But here's the thing about salvage masters. They aren't captains. A captain has to actually sail the ship. The salvage master has to merely tip it upright, drag it back to port, and collect the fee. The 2 times JJ has attempted to be a ship's captain, he has, in my opinion, failed completely. Both Super 8 and Star Trek Into Darkness were rehashes of prior works. I suspect the thing that makes him a salvage master is the very thing that makes him a poor captain. He can't sail anywhere that hasn't already been sailed. Watching Force Awakens was like watching someone feed IBM punch cards of the original trilogy to a Star Wars scene generator, which then spat out a new scene. It's like watching a pilot for a TV show that would eventually get good. The characters are already there, so why not have them go on their own adventure instead of rehashing prior ones on Tatooine, Yavin, Hoth, Endor, etc. This isn't fiction, it's fan fiction. Most of all, I'm absolutely sick that in 2015 I get to keep going to the theater to watch yet another salvage job. Fucking go tell a story already. The Bond franchise has been setting up James Bond for 10 years. Every Marvel movie is a 2-hour, 20-minute trailer for the next Marvel trailer, which is a 2-minute, 20-second teaser for the next Marvel movie. Worst of all, major studios have discovered the template for success, and it isn't making good movies. All you have to do is make a trilogy of films that goes, Movie 1, the characters are good, and it reminded me of why I love this franchise in the first place. Movie 2, wow, this one's amazing. This story stands on its own. Oh my gosh. Movie 3, this was such a letdown, I don't know if I believe in the franchise anymore. Wait 5 years, lather, rinse, and repeat. Anyway, I just thought that last part, I know that was a long quote, sorry guys.
Very cynical, but...
that last part, I just thought, oh my gosh, that's the conversation we're having right now, exactly.
I mean, I do agree with his salvage master metaphor in the beginning, but I do think he's being completely unfair. J.J. Abrams has directed a lot of great original stuff. You look at, the first 2 episodes of Lost, first 2 episodes of Alias. Mm-hmm. There is original work by him that isn't him, just... leeching off others. I don't know. That just seems completely unfair.
I mean, that's been his film career. So I guess it's a legitimate
he's talking about the films. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if you look beyond the films and his TV work, maybe I feel like we look down on him a little too because he came out of TV. I don't know. That's what I've seen from a lot of criticism. I don't want to go down that route. I think he's plenty talented, just very different than Ryan.
Here's what I think we can agree.
No doubt.
Here's what I think we can agree on is that. that episode 3 will really test him, I think. And I look forward to seeing what will happen. I hope he rises to the challenge and delivers us a really satisfying conclusion. I
think the pertinent point here, and the why we kind of tangented this far into that discussion, is, at least from my perspective, is that all of those reservations that I had, and I think a lot of people had after Force Awakens, which is like, it's great, but there's this analog to the Death Star, and we're still on a desert planet.
As you put it, Jeff, there are a lot of buts, right? Is that what you call it?
Right. There's none of that in The Last Jedi. None of that. Like,
totally disagree. But
I disagree on this one.
Okay, all right. We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it. I'll just say one last thing before we move into spoilers, which is that it is insane that Rian Johnson made a Star Wars, guys.
This is very insane.
I mean,
I'm still reeling from this fact.
They some people in the Slack Filmcast put together like this. Someone created an RSS feed of just Rian Johnson episodes. Dude's been on our podcast like half a dozen times. I remember the first time I met him, it was to interview him for The Brothers Bloom at the Independent Film Festival of Boston, like almost a decade ago. And actually, when did that movie come out? Yeah, almost a decade ago. And very humble guy, very unassuming guy, very funny guy. Of course, he appeared on the podcast multiple times just to troll me, a task that he got far better at as the years went on. But it is just, he's like living the American, like the filmmaker's version of the American dream. To go from making an indie film, I think the movie cost like $500,000, Brick did, to then like successively ramping up, making some of the best Breaking Bad episodes ever, and then getting to one of the, if not the biggest franchise on the planet. It's quite an achievement, and it's amazing.
And now he's listening to this.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
He's going to spend the next 10 years of his life doing that too. It's crazy.
Right.
And I interviewed him a week and a half ago. He's that same humble, nice guy. Like, he has not changed at all. And when I interviewed him, I asked him, I was like, is this going to be the next 10 years of your life? Are we going to get another Rian Johnson original? And he was like, listen, I have ideas, and I want to do one of those ideas before we get into that. So hopefully I can still get these things happening.
He could do the Nolan thing if he has time.
Yeah, one for them, one for me kind of thing. Yeah. But anyway, I doubt he's listening to this, but wanted to say congratulations to him for this massive achievement. And we hope that he'll be able to make an appearance on the show at some point in the future. But just wanted to acknowledge that this guy has made the journey from, Sundance Grand Jury winner to one of the biggest, probably the biggest film of this year from a box office perspective. So that's just incredible to see. And hopefully those of you who have been listening to this podcast for as long as we've been around have enjoyed being a tiny, tiny, tiny part of that journey, or at least seeing snapshots of that journey as he went along. So all that said, guys, we are going to stop the broadcast fairly soon here because we're broadcasting live, but the movie is not out yet, so we don't want to broadcast spoilers into the ether. But wanted to thank people who've donated to the podcast in the last week. Arthur Wyckoff and Lisa Hawthorne, thanks so much for your contributions. If you want to donate, you can always go to paypal.me/filmcast. That's paypal.me/filmcast. All the money you donate goes to help us defray the cost of doing the show. And we really appreciate it. So thanks to Arthur and Lisa for donating this week. Guys, let's get to spoilers for The Last Jedi starting right now.